Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and thanks to the witnesses for joining us today. Since the summer, the administration has launched more than 40 strikes on alleged drug boats in international waters, mostly in the Caribbean, killing at least 157 people. This is without any declaration of war, and I am also moved, like Ms. Crockett, by all the young people here today, and I just want to remind you to read your Constitution, because in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, it gives Congress the power to declare war. The founders of our country were so adamant about this. James Madison wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson specifically on the subject, saying that the kings were constantly plunging their countries into wars of conceit and vanity, imperial avarice and corruption, and it had to be the representatives of the people who decide to go to war, and not one guy. So today, not Donald Trump, not J.D. Vance, not Tulsi Gabbard, it's got to be the representatives of the people. But as with what's taking place in Iran today, there's no declaration of war. And as I survey the wreckage of this administration's drug enforcement policy, I'm reminded of what Talleyrand said about Napoleon, who murdered one of his cousins. He said, "This is worse than a crime, it's a mistake." And so what has taken place with these lethal strikes on drug boats is both a crime, murder, plain and simple, but it's also a mistake. The administration has not provided any plausible legal justification under domestic or international law for Trump to use the military to kill anyone that he unilaterally deems to be a terrorist. If these people were on U.S. soil, they would be arrested based on probable cause, if it existed. They'd be indicted. They'd be tried in court. And then they'd be convicted by a jury of their peers, or they'd be acquitted. Donald Trump knows something about the criminal justice process. He demanded every right in the arsenal of due process rights we have. And well, he should have when he was convicted on 36 different counts of felony fraud, but he had the right to counsel, he had the right to present evidence, he had the right to cross-examine, he had the right to be indicted, and he had a right to a jury of his peers deciding the case. Even out at sea, our Coast Guard knows how to interdict a ship and take sailors into custody. In America, we arrest and we prosecute people who commit crimes. We don't blow them out of the water with a Hellfire missile. These boat strikes are also, though, spectacular and costly mistakes. Obviously a made-for-TikTok distraction, covering up the completely ineffectual drug policies of the administration, and then, in a self-defeating way, preventing us from focusing on what really works in fighting drugs. Under the Biden administration, the U.S. saw the largest drop in opioid and fentanyl overdose deaths in history, from 80,000 in 2023 to 54,000 in 2024. Again, a huge number of people, but still moving things in the right direction. In West Virginia, opioid deaths declined by 46%. In Wisconsin, by 44%. Things were moving in the right direction. President Trump appears to be doing everything in his power to reverse this progress with his characteristic recklessness and bravado. Just a few months ago, he slashed staffing at the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration by 50%. He terminated $1.7 billion in block grants for mental health services for state health departments, and he cut $350 million in addiction and overdose prevention funding in 2025. It's already way underfunded, but he's been slashing away at the money that's actually there. His one big ugly bill cut tens of billions of dollars out of Medicaid, which provides health coverage to nearly half of adults in America who have an opioid use disorder. But we're not going to be able to treat addiction to opioids in the crisis we have in overdoses by blowing up boats in the middle of the ocean. We've got to treat the people who are suffering from these addictions. Mr. Chairman, it's not a video game, it's a national public health and medical emergency, and we're not going to be able to bomb our way out of a fentanyl crisis. So, more than 5,000 FBI and DEA agents have been reassigned from combating drug cartels, actually fighting drug cartels, to immigration enforcement in order to meet Stephen Miller's immigration quotas. Last year, Attorney General Bondi terminated the Department of Justice's Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Forces, a long-standing strike force created by Ronald Reagan, which allowed DOJ to coordinate with agencies investigating cartels and international criminal networks. Over the last 4 decades, these task forces conducted more than 37,000 investigations of overseas criminal drug and trafficking enterprises, leading to the conviction of over 321,000 defendants, and we're dismantling it. Our witness today, Thomas Padden, is the former acting director of the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force. As a nonpartisan law enforcement professional, Mr. Padden can testify to what was the efficacy and utility of this task force when it comes to dismantling drug trafficking networks. And he can explain just how dangerous the elimination of these tools will be, and already has been, for our country. The Trump administration claims it launched these deadly boat strikes because the Maduro regime was bringing cocaine into the United States. And Trump is a tough and determined fighter of cocaine. But check this out. Just last year, President Trump pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez, the convicted mega cocaine trafficker and disgraced former president of the country of Honduras. Hernandez turned Honduras into a full-blown narco state and used his presidency to operate one of the largest and most violent drug trafficking conspiracies on earth. When asked why Trump would pardon a narco trafficker responsible for shipping 400 tons of cocaine, that's more than 800,000 pounds of cocaine. Someone will correct my math if I'm wrong on that. 800,000 pounds of cocaine into our country. President Trump responded that the decade-long criminal investigation into Hernandez was, quote, nothing more than a Biden setup, which is a remarkable claim given that it was Trump's own former defense attorney and former DOJ senior official and now handpicked federal judge Emile Bove who built the case against Hernandez and his family during Trump's first term. But Hernandez, the coke smuggler and dealer, who was taped saying, we're going to shove the drugs up the noses of the gringos, he had apparently other connections to the Trump family and the Trump White House, and he was able to get his pardon. And if you think that was unusual, check out Trump's pardon of Ross Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road, a website that facilitated more than 1.5 million narcotics transactions. Prosecutors described Ulbricht as the kingpin of a worldwide digital drug trafficking enterprise for his role in operating the crypto-powered online black market, which facilitated the sale not just of cocaine, but heroin and fentanyl and other deadly drugs. Well, this drug kingpin-friendly administration has cut healthcare funding for Americans who are suffering from opioid use disorder. They've pardoned narco traffickers and they've dismantled the law enforcement apparatus that actually combats drug trafficking and international crime. Federal drug prosecutions dropped by 10% last year. This new shoot first, ask questions later approach to the war on drugs has not substantially stopped drugs from coming to the country in any way. And for decades, the Coast Guard stopped the same boats we're blowing up now. We've not stopped any fentanyl from coming to the United States, the drug primarily responsible for killing Americans, since Venezuela does not produce or export any substantial amount of fentanyl. They changed the subject and started talking about cocaine. These strikes fundamentally weaken our ability to bring cases against drug kingpins or the networks that actually sent these drugs, since we're blowing up the lower level witnesses that we need in order to indict and prosecute higher level operators. Well, it's not just the pardons that make no sense. ICE's obsession with meeting Miller's deportation targets has led them to detain individuals who should be standing trial for their drug offenses. In a number of cases, state drug cases have been delayed or even dismissed altogether, where defendants detained by ICE have failed to appear in court. One judge was forced to dismiss a case against a person working with the Sinaloa drug cartel because he was in ICE custody instead and was deported. If they've committed crimes here, they should be prosecuted here, and they should be sentenced and fined here. The billions of dollars these unlawful and ineffective executions cost could be used to save American lives. We should fully restore mental health service funding. We could support rural hospitals that are on the front line of this addiction crisis. We could be investigating real drug traffickers and prosecuting more drug cases. But Secretary of War Hegseth needs his clicks, and so we continue bumbling down this reckless, inexplicable, and counterproductive path. It's not just a crime, it's a mistake. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.